Hey, it's Mosquito, also known as Chris. Welcome to the shop. About a month ago, I took a wood turning class through the Minnesota Woodturners Association, and it was for platters. So I decided I have a bunch of this walnut that's about 1.5 inches thick, so I'm gonna make a couple more platters. So that's what this is. I'm gonna walk you through the process of how I was just taught to make a platter. And we're gonna make one, and hopefully I don't screw it up too bad. So here I am on my very, very crude walnut cutting circle jig. Yeah, it's basically just a chunk of shelving with a screw through it, but it gets the job done. So that's what I use for this, and we will get to turning a platter. The instructor that I took a class from had this bushing that was designed to go into the backside of your chuck, and then there was a center punch that you could then slide through the bushing, and that's how you could get a center wherever the center of your actual chucked up workpiece would be. However, I haven't been able to find that, and then I got to thinking, you know, I can have my drive center in, and I can put the chuck on, chuck, faceplate, both thread on the same lathe. So that fits through there pretty good. And now I shouldn't say that this is going to work for everybody's lathe, but these both came with my jet lathe and they fit. This was, I believe, just a generic Amazon purchase for a different lathe. This is for my bigger lathe, and it's got, instead of the 1x8, it's the 1.25x8, and then this is, I think it's a PSI. Anyway, these two things didn't come together, and the same thing effectively works there. So, hey, look at that. It works. No bushing required. Since we cut out these things on the bandsaw, there's that little mark from the screw. I can put the center of my drive center on it, and then I can drop my faceplate on that. And then this is relatively centered within a pretty confident margin. So then once we have our center, we're just going to take a couple of screws and we are going to get this thing installed. So not perfect, but pretty dang good considering it came off of a bandsaw. Neat little trick. Slight camera change, slight audio change. That's because where the lathe is against the wall, I really can't get the good camera all up in here without getting it in the way. Okay, so blank is on. Name of the game is, first thing is to get it round. So I'm using a 5/8 inch bowl gouge with a push cut with a 40/40 grind, and I should note you need to be a little bit careful here because the direction I'm cutting, I'm pretty confident in this wood. It's pretty good, but you want to make sure you don't have anything blow out on the backside because that's actually going to be the top of the platter. And since that's where we're going to be cutting the bead, we want to make sure to preserve as much as we can. So right now, this platter is sitting like this in there, where bottom, top over here. So what we're going to do is make this little bead here. There's a little bead around the outside, and that's going to end up here. So we're just going to make enough of a flat spot to make sure that we can get the right measurement, because it'll have to be obviously flat before we do that. So we're going to do that part next, and then we're going to flatten the face over here. And for this, I'm just going to do a shear cut because it's a lot easier. And here I'm just using a combination of push cutting and pull shear cutting just because it helps to move things along quickly. Smooth flat section all the way around the top. Outside is round. Got to flatten the face. And the name of the game when you get to the middle is slow down. Because out here on the edge, the wood is spinning a whole lot faster. Well, it's spinning the same rate, but it's moving a whole lot faster. And here I've switched gouges. This is still a 5/8, but this one, instead of the 40/40 grind, has an Ellsworth grind to it, so a much longer wing. And I just kind of prefer that grind when I'm doing things like this, where I'm doing that shear scrape. You can see I've got the handle pretty low, and I'm just using that wing to kind of pull it. And I don't know why, but when I'm flattening faces, I seem to do a lot better with a shear scrape with something like this rather than trying to do a push cut all the way across, but that's just me. One of the things we want to do is figure out about the size we want this bead to be, and it should be somewhere between 5/16 and 3/8. So I'm going to mark at 3/8. We want to measure and mark about 2 inches from your outside edge here, so right around 2 inches. So here you can see why we wanted to flatten that little strip on the back or on the top of the platter, because otherwise this measurement here wouldn't really be reliable. We're going to want to clear from this line to the rim line. So from here to there, we're going to want to run a bevel straight across there. So I seem to switch tools quite a bit, but here I'm back to the 5/8 inch with the 40/40 grind for a push cut, and I'm just pushing through the bevel. And essentially, I line up my tool rest to try and be the same plane that would intersect with those two lines, just because then I can use that kind of as a guide to eyeball it. You just kind of keep turning until you're close and adjust as needed. Mark the center here. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So you can just roughly eyeball that somewhere in the middle. So there, I'm going to put that line back there. And this line back there. So now we've got roughly equal sections here, and we're just going to turn a cove in between those two sections. So it'll be rounded, rounded. And basically what you do is you go out and back, and you go out and back. So that's basically how you get your coves. So the goal is to be as smooth as you can for these, because that'll help get you a more consistent profile. And I'm just riding the bevel on my bowl gouge, but I still struggle a little bit with that. So it's not perfect, but you could also use carbide tools for this. It wouldn't be terrible to use those here either, just because that might make it a little bit easier to make the profile. But here I just come back in with that Ellsworth grind bowl gouge again. I should probably just use a scraper, but that's for later. We'll use the scraper later. All right, so I've got that all scraped in. So I've got the hollow, and the ridge in the middle. I guess technically you could leave it if you wanted to, just leave that hard edge in the middle, but I'm going to smooth it out just because I like how subtle it is on the other one. So here's that 5/8 inch Ellsworth again. I don't know, maybe I'll try using a scraper for the next one. What I'm using is 100mm jaws. I recommend something that size just because it'll be a pretty good size for that, but you don't want to go too small because it's a big thing, and once you start turning the other side, if you have small jaws just holding in the middle, the torque is a lot higher. But basically what I'm going to do is I have them a little bit open, and the reason for having them a little bit open is so that once they're expanded, I can get this in there still, so I can use that to check my thickness. In my case, it's 4 inches, so I will mark this at 2. It never hurts to double check. Right about 4. Okay, so we're going to sink this in, and then it'll be dovetailed, and then we'll put the jaws in it and expand. So the first thing is we mark that out, and now we're going to turn a little bit of this out, and you want to go somewhere in the roughly, I don't know, whatever makes you comfortable, I guess. In the class, they said, you don't have to go any deeper than 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. And that's not very deep, and that is what we use to turn this thing. And nobody's bowl flew off the lathe, or platter rather flew off the lathe, so I guess it works. And we're gonna recess about 1/8 of an inch, slightly more probably, because I am a chicken.
Still with that 40/40 push cut, I'm just clearing out a little bit of the middle, and this can actually stay a little bit domed if you want to, as long as it's, lower than the bottom of the bowl, you'll be just fine.
My shape turned in on the bottom here and roughly to size. Now I've got two different tools. This one here is the actual like Nova tool, whatever they call it, Nova dovetail chisel, and that profile right here, if I went straight in, matches the dovetail on their jaws. So if you have one of those and that's what you use, it might work out well for you. Otherwise, truthfully, I often just end up using a skew.
I keep calling this a skew, but really it's basically just a scraper the way I've got it sharpened. But I kind of go in and define that angle a little bit and then just feather that into the rest of that profile on the bottom. And then I've got that Nova dovetail chisel to just sort of clean it up, make sure that's all happy. And then I angle this in a little bit so that the outer rim is a little bit taller. That way it sits flat.
All right, that should get the job done.
And the finish that I'm using is tried and true original wood finish, and I like it because it's nice and easy, basically just on and off, but it's like a linseed oil and beeswax finish that you just apply, wait for it to kind of cure a little bit, and then you come back like this and buff it off, and then you're good. Man, looking at this already, this wood is looking good. But now I reinstall the chuck, and I just like to do that, I don't know, because I'm lazy and I don't want to get out my faceplate wrench, so I can use the key to get it off, and then we can work on taking off that faceplate, get this thing turned around, chucked back up on the actual chuck, and then we can go to town flattening the top. So get that thing put on, and then I'm just using that 5/8 inch push cut again and just go across the front. It doesn't have to be perfect yet.
We're going to mark about 1.25 inches in from the edge, and that's going to define where the edge of our bowl is going to start. And so I'm going to mark that on there quick. Going to mark out a dish that's about 3 inches or so wide. Basically, we're going to turn this part down about 1/2 to 3/8 of an inch deep or so. We're going to hollow back just enough so that we can work on this rim. So I'm going to kind of scoop out a little bit here to get started and then sort of shallow hollow this part, and then that'll allow us to turn this part later.
Like I said, we're just going to hollow out a little bit of this here, and I guess technically you don't have to. It's just, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of work into something that's hollowed out already. And then after that, we kind of just make a series of ridges. You can see I just kind of make a short little cut just to kind of knock off some of that. Will eventually waste material, and it helps do it pretty quick because we don't need to go too far.
Okay, so obviously this is a little bit rough at the moment, so this, you don't want to go too far with this because every bit that you take out of here in thickness is going to make the outside edge be able to wobble just a little bit more. So don't go crazy on this part. In fact, I may have even already turned a little bit too much, but it's okay. We'll get it figured out. Next thing we're going to do is going to form this out so it kind of has like a bit of a pillow shape. So we're going to start here and just sort of dive into the platter just a little bit, but that's why we had to turn out some of this, is because we needed to be able to round that in. So we're going to basically just start out straight and then dive in just a little bit.
Once again, back with the push cut, and you can see I just sort of curve that around and get a nice little profile on there and scrape it clean.
Take this measurement here. So you take the thickness, transfer it to the face. So basically, eyeball about that, eyeball about that. So that's about where I'm going to be. And we're just going to use the point of the skew, and we're going to mark basically just a V, and that'll be the delimiter of our bead.
So once again with that scraper skew thing. Yeah, so you basically just go straight in and get your V, and then what I do is I just kind of rock to kind of continue that profile to just sort of bevel it in, or not bevel, I guess, feather it into the rounded profile that we had already cut with the bowl gouge, and it just kind of cleans it up and makes a nice smooth transition, but then it leaves us with a nice hard edge that we can come in and, well, turn the bead on. So that's what we're doing here. And then we switch to a bowl gouge, and I actually switched to the, let's see, 5/8, so 1/2 inch or 3/8 smaller bowl gouge, and I'm just using that to turn the bead because it kind of gets into that little edge a little bit easier. But then you just kind of round it out this way, and then we'll come back in and do the other side. Now I've switched around over here to the other side and just slow, steady, smooth. Try to get a nice profile that you don't have to go back in and tweak a whole lot. But I end up scraping with the bowl gouge, but then I realize, hey, I have an actual scraper. Why don't I use my actual scraper? So we're gonna switch to an actual scraper for the first time. And I just use that to refine the edge and get it a little bit cleaner. And then a whole bunch more sanding and get some finish applied because, I mean, essentially at this point, nothing that we do is going to make this rim any stronger. So we'll get that taken care of, and then what we do is we switch over and start just hogging out some more of the material for that, well, I guess the bowl part of the platter.
Oh, that's about 1/2 inch. So I've got a little bit more room to go on that, which will be good. Otherwise, I just need to make everything else blend in.
Never hurts to check the thickness often because you certainly don't want to go through. Whether make a picture frame, candle holder, I've done that before, a funnel. Anyway, we're just going to keep kind of hollowing this out and checking the thickness and hollowing it out a little bit more and refining that shape until we're pretty happy with it, and just throw some shavings. Now I come back with that scraper and just clean everything all up, get it all nice and smooth, make the sanding as minimal as possible. And then checking this, it's right at about 3/8 of an inch, and that is pretty much where I'm going to leave it. Then we come back to do a bunch of sanding. So we just kind of sand this. I should say, like, for the most part, I've been starting at around 120 or 150 grit and going up to about 320, and then just applying some finish from there. You can feel free to start lower and go higher, or do whatever you want. But man, I am really liking the way that this walnut is looking once I'm getting some finish on it. So getting pretty excited for this one.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna let that finish dry a little bit more. I already buffed it out a little bit, but that probably wasn't long enough. But it's late and I'm impatient, so I'll probably clean that up maybe tomorrow. But I am happy with that. I think it turned out pretty cool. And I think this one's a little bit thinner. Like, I think I got the thickness from here to the actual dish portion a little bit thinner than I did on the one that I turned at the class. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm also happy that I was able to pull that off on my own after taking the class. So awesome. Well, I've got 3 more blanks to go, so who knows? Maybe I'll do another one. I don't know if I'll do another video because, well, you've seen them. Maybe I'll throw up a time lapse or something. Maybe I'll even live stream one. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Would you want to see me try to live stream one of these and see how that goes? I'd have to do it on a night where I've got enough time to get it done. But anyway, I appreciate those of you that stuck around this far, and I hope you learned something or at least had some entertainment for a little while. I appreciate you nonetheless, and I will catch you in the next one.